Building codes established and enforced in municipalities today regulate the construction of buildings and other structures to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the general public. Although some major cities in the United States still have their own building codes, most municipalities adopt a state code as the foundation for local building control and modify the regulations through amendments based on their unique goals and resources. Some states build on the International Building Code, IBC, which serves as a national model in the United States. Building codes evolve over time through amendments and modifications. It is interesting to note that building codes in the U.S. did not start out as government regulations designed to protect the public. Around the turn of the 20th century, huge conflagrations in San Francisco and Baltimore and the 1906 San Francisco earthquake compelled insurance companies to explore ways to manage risk more effectively. Working with the National Board of Fire Underwriters, NBFU, the industry developed a survey that considered every aspect of a municipality, from topography and local weather to civic affairs and roadways. Using this survey, insurance companies established guidelines for building codes that addressed doors, shutters, and building materials, as well as fire department equipment and firehouse locations. Their goal was to encourage municipalities who wished to get more favorable rates that they would adopt these guides. Early building codes were driven by financial motives and developed to protect property, not people. Let's talk about what is covered under a building code. Remember those exhaustive insurance company surveys mentioned a minute ago? If you look at what is regulated by building codes today, you can see fire protection still plays a significant role in shaping the municipal policy. However, in recent years, there has been a push to implement sustainability guidelines that protect the environment, curb energy consumption, and reduce our nation's carbon footprint. Here is a brief snapshot of some of the various components covered in standard building control policies. Construction type. A primary focus in the code is establishing building construction rules and guidelines. The type of building materials used often determines how the building may be used. The size, placement, and number of fire exits in the building, and the type of fire protection required. Most buildings are erected with a wood, concrete, or steel frame. Other building materials and supplies. Municipal ordinances and building codes also cover things like paint, types of pipe, and electric wiring. At times, a variety of agencies may have overlapping regulations that directly and indirectly govern building construction and rehabilitation. Consider lead abatement. Multiple agencies contribute laws and statutes regarding the removal, disposal, and use of lead-based paint. Since 1960, New York City has banned the use of lead-based paint in almost all residential dwellings. There are a few exceptions. Condominium owners are not required to remediate homes with existing lead paint, as long as they occupy the home. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, issues rules about disposal and removal during rehabilitation. And many states like California have enacted health and safety codes and housing law that governs contractor licensure, disclosure rules, and guidelines that were established to prevent childhood exposure. Not all of the rules fall under the umbrella of building code enforcement, but it is important to recognize few code amendments are developed without considering whether new regulations will intersect with existing standards. Occupancy type. Occupancy is based on the structural material and intended use. For example, the code only allows single-family residences to be built using wood frame, sometimes called stick-built, construction. Commercial buildings, multifamily homes, office and retail space, and industrial manufacturing structures must be built using concrete or steel frames. Building code establishes a maximum of permitted occupants per floor and per use. There are specific formulas for calculating occupancy rates based on normal activity in a building or on a specific floor. As an example, IBC code recommends 15 square feet of floor space for each occupant in an area without concentrated seating. That means a restaurant having 1,000 square feet furnished with well-spaced tables and chairs could accommodate 66 patrons. A dance club, on the other hand, with more concentrated use of chairs, only has to have 7 square feet of floor space per occupant. So, the same 1,000 square feet could safely accommodate a maximum occupancy of 142 customers. Since building occupancy is determined by floor area and height, i.e. stories, let's discuss some limitations and flexibility within the code. Wood frame structures are limited to 2 stories and smaller floor area than concrete or steel structures, with a few exceptions. You will never see a wood frame skyscraper. Some building codes don't limit the height and floor area for steel and concrete frame construction. Not all wood structures follow the same regulations, though. Consider log home construction, which is governed by ICC 400-2012. Log construction has a unique set of requirements, in addition to the standards that cover plumbing, electrical, foundation, and mechanical codes. The standards establish metrics for lumber grade, sustainability, fire resistance, potential for shifting, energy conservation, and wall protection via specific roof designs that channel water away from the building envelope. Today's log homes may be small cabins or massive 3-level homes with 7,000 or 8,000 square feet, depending on the location and local building code considerations. Exit and entrance requirements depend on the type of construction and use as well. The number and location of egress points are typically determined per floor. Floors with more occupants, such as hotels or apartments, require more exits than single-family homes and small business locations. In multi-story buildings, an exit is generally a fire-rated stair leading to the lowest or ground level floor. The Municipal Building Code also describes the maximum travel distance to an exit. This distance is calculated by measuring the distance from the most remote point on a floor from a fire exit or stair. Standards determine the width of a fire stair based on projected occupancy and building use. Let's take a look at a function hall to better understand how hallway, door, and stair width impacts safety during a fire. The IBC recommends stair exits to have at least 0.3 inches of doorway per person to allow safe egress. Traditional doorways require 0.2 inches per occupant. A meeting room with a 2,000-person maximum occupancy on the ground floor without stairs needs 400 inches of doorway or 12 exits. There must be at least one operable window, door, or other device in every room used for sleeping quarters that allows safe entrance and egress during an emergency. Size mandates vary by region. The International Residential Code, IRC, has extensive recommendations for health and fire safety, including: the egress window must have a minimum glass area that measures at least 8% of the total square footage of the room or rooms. It services to allow sufficient natural light to flow through the window. The minimum opening for egress windows must be 20 inches by 24 inches, height by width. In order to provide adequate natural ventilation, an egress window must have an opening that measures at least 4% of the square footage of the room or rooms served. Fire protection as a means of preventing loss of life has been a major driving force behind building code enforcement since 1947, when President Truman ordered a national conference on fire safety and prevention after 2 significant hotel fires claimed dozens of lives. 41% of guests staying at the Winecoff Hotel in Atlanta, Georgia, lost their lives when fire broke out on December 7, 1946. Just a few months earlier, 61 people lost their lives in the LaSalle Hotel fire in Chicago. Both tragedies could have been avoided, or perhaps fewer people would have died, if the stair designs had provided more protection from the spread of fire, such as installing doors in the stairwell and making sure there was adequate egress based on occupancy numbers. Building code standards don't just address the primary construction type and intended use. Like log home guidelines that require specific fire-resistant applications, codes determine the minimum fire protection standards for each building type. Fire protection measures may include applying spray-on fireproofing material to steel members in steel frame structures that provides at least a 2-hour protection window, installing sprinkler systems and/or fire suppression systems in commercial, industrial, retail, and multifamily buildings. Special guidelines for mixed-use buildings may require a minimum protection wall between residential and commercial spaces. For example, if a mixed-use building houses a bakery, restaurant, or other retail space on the first floor and housing on upper floors, the code may require a 2-hour separation or enhance firewall between the floors. Installing gypsum separation walls between adjoining townhouses or condos. Gypsum partitions provide 2-hour fire protection and are constructed with steel studs and tracks and gypsum liner panels joined by aluminum clips. These types of walls are typically seen in buildings with 1 to 4 stories. Occupancy codes also address accessibility for disabled persons. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, details design requirements for most public buildings and residential rental buildings. The standards establish guidelines for door widths, corridor widths, ramp requirements, parking structures, and other features. If state or local code conflicts with ADA standards, the more stringent regulations will typically be adopted and enforced. Here are a handful of ADA guidelines that inform building code development. 1. Door width under ADA standards must measure between 32 and 48 inches. However, many municipalities and some states require a minimum of 36 inches to accommodate larger wheelchairs and walkers. 2. Ramp design is complex and varies depending on whether the ramp is built to accommodate public access or as part of a handicap-accessible residence. ADA standards require 1 linear foot of ramp for every inch of rise. Builders use a 1:12 slope ratio to achieve this benchmark. Other regulations govern landing size, curbs, sidewalls, handrails, and width, depending on whether the ramp is an external or interior improvement. Compliance with ADA standards requires a 5-foot by 5-foot turn landing platform. However, California code is more stringent, requiring a 6-foot minimum in the direction of travel. Guardrails in most states must be between 34 inches and 39 inches and must be installed on both sides of the ramp. 3. Corridor hallway width varies significantly depending on the environment. While the standard is 36 inches, some exceptions have been made to allow certain hallway sections to accommodate architectural features. Some codes allow reduced width as long as the narrow spaces are limited in length to a short distance and there are at least 48 inches of length between the reduced widths to navigate the route safely. 4. Standards for protruding objects in circulation paths, such as water fountains in public buildings. Circulation paths are more than just hallways. They also include walks, courtyards, platform lifts, stairways, ramps, and even connecting corridors between rooms. To allow people with visual and mobility challenges, designers must consider wheelchair-bound persons as well as people who use a blind cane or walker. There are both vertical and horizontal standards. For example, cane detection areas are below 27 inches. Anything protruding from the wall must be positioned between 27 inches and 80 inches above the floor, and to extend no more than 4 inches into a circulation path. Handicap rails are the exception, and in most cases may extend up to 4.5 inches into the path. There are some exceptions for different types of protrusions. Objects installed on poles and pylons may extend up to 12 inches into the pathway or corridor. There are many building code sections, but we have covered the most common here. Now, let's discuss the Certificate of Occupancy. Once all required inspections have been completed and successfully passed, a local governing body issues a Certificate of Occupancy, often referred to as the final CO. This document certifies a house or other building is safe for habitation or commercial use. The CO demonstrates that the completed project significantly follows the design set forth in the original application for a building permit. While each local authority may require a different set of inspections before issuing the CO, most require a plumbing inspection, fire marshal review, electrical inspection, and, when appropriate, a health department certificate and ADA compliance survey for public buildings and rental properties that will serve disabled persons. Special inspections may be required if a building has one or more elevators, utilizes a dedicated water system, and for mechanical features such as heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems are installed. And now some final thoughts about building codes and real estate markets. As a real estate agent, you may work with developers, builders, and individual owners. Understanding how building codes impact land and building investments is essential to serving these diverse groups with different financial goals. Keep in mind that geographic location, community culture, global initiatives, and private industry all shape regional codes and may trigger amendments. Tragic events, such as the fires that prompted President Truman to lead the effort to improve fire prevention strategies, may stimulate modification to local codes. Innovation and activism may also drive change, as we have seen in recent years with the development of sustainable building materials and alternative energy options like solar and wind find their way into building standards from Bangor, Maine to San Francisco, California. Remember that local code enforcement doesn't apply to new construction homes. According to 101.4.2 of the Florida State Building Code, statutes govern the construction, erection, alteration, modification, repair, equipment, use and occupancy, location, maintenance, removal, and demolition of every public and private building and structure. Florida is a state that has different code regulations for every county. For example, building codes in communities along the Florida coast may include standards for elevating homes to protect assets from tidal surges and weather-related beach erosion. Broward and Miami-Dade counties require additional design features that protect against wind-borne debris from high-velocity hurricanes. State codes also include mandates to protect and preserve coastal barrier dunes from construction activity that could destabilize the beach dune ecosystem. In parts of Texas, state building code may include special requirements to strengthen fireproofing standards to protect people and assets in rural communities at risk for wildfires or enhanced design to reduce damage from tornadoes. Safety experts encouraged the state to update existing codes after a devastating tornado plowed through Dallas in 2016, urging lawmakers to seriously consider adopting statewide standards that reduce risk during inclement weather events. Among the suggestions were changes that force or encourage improvements to minimize damage by reinforcing the roof system, incorporate stronger building envelope elements, such as windows and doors designed to withstand high winds and flying debris, form a continuous load path that runs from the roof to the foundation. While not required for this course, you might spend a few minutes thinking about the community where you live. Are there special environmental factors that could influence changes in the local building codes? Have recent academic or scientific research identified threats to the general population, like lead-based paint? Does your climate include weather events like blizzards, hurricanes, earthquakes, or prolonged periods of excessive heat? These are the types of questions that city leaders must carefully consider to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the citizenry.